down, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
The cost of toys is often a fickle thing. It's hard to determine what is worthy of its price and what isn't. Double Dealer is hollowed out to oblivion and scrappy as hell. Yet shortly after, Grimlock was able to deliver on the massive Chunkitude. Whether a toy is worth its asking price is determined by a lot of factors. Complexity of design, how many units are being produced, viability of reuse later down the track, popularity of character, then throw the aftermarket in the mix and it's a whole extra level of fuckery. Some random lugnut toy that is widely released suddenly costs upwards of $300 dues. But an employee exclusive gift goes for $40 because nobody cares. There are some toys that reach levels of expense so high that they'll never be worth the price people ask of them, and others where you wonder how you're able to get them so absurdly cheap. Discussing toys that fit into weird categories is difficult because how can you quantify whether a figure is worth what people ask for it? If a figure is so expensive that it got people laughing in disbelief behind their phone screens and monitors, can you so easily write off its price as absurd? Or the opposite, can you write off the genuine concerns these people have at price gouging? It's honestly fascinating. How can a figure so small generate so much discourse? Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Mattel Creations Hot Wheels HXT02 Optimus Prime. The designation number apparently means nothing, aside from some supposed maths nonsense that spells out Optimus Prime. Seems a bit silly to me, but hey, at least the designer was having fun. Honestly, it's kinda surprising we even got something like this at all, given how against each other Hasbro and Mattel have been for the majority of their existence in the market space. Often Hasbro's been flat out unable to do certain things, like give Dino an accurate vehicle mode, specifically because Mattel is so draconian with their license. And I'm sure there's gotta be an equivalent with something Hasbro did. Honestly, when the prospect first came up, I was expecting something more along the lines of the Takara Bandai collaboration, where we got Gundam-colored Zoids vehicle, and Hello Kitty Beyblades. Oh, and nothing featuring Transformers, mind you. Heaven forbid we bridge the gap and make something that wouldn't be possible otherwise! Under the confusing and tumultuous rules of IP management, it makes sense why the only transforming products they offered would be a limited release, under the Mattel Creations storefront. I'll get into what this release strategy entails later, but for a basic rundown, it's sort of like HasLab or P Bandai, closer to the latter though, unfortunately. Point is, the release system makes sense in concept, doubly so as a wider release would steal sales from both Missing Link and the upcoming Legacy Deluxe. Side note, people kept asking me to do these as a three-way review, but aside from not bothering with Missing Link, HXT02 is so fundamentally different from the other two that comparing wouldn't make sense. As for who was at the helm of the project, it was produced by Manson Chung, a Hot Wheels designer with over 2 decades of experience at the company. Would have been neat to get someone with Transformers history on the project, like with LEGO Optimus Prime, but given it's basically just a shrunken down version of the G1 toy, it wasn't particularly necessary. The work was practically already done years ago. It's basically a copy-paste job. And that's basically how the vehicle mode feels. It's the G1 alt mode, almost to the T. Done entirely in diecast with a fully chrome finish. Almost everything has been meticulously copied over. All the... Why does it say rivets? Rivets? How the f*** does that even make that typo? Almost everything has been meticulously copied over. All the rivets, the same style of grille, near identical windows, it's all here and it's all done exceptionally well. At a glance, the only thing that's particularly different is the proportions from the front, which compared to the G1 original is actually slightly shorter and fatter. I don't think it's for the sake of accuracy, as the G1 toy is already an approximation of the actual truck, lacking the subtle sloping, which is something the non-transforming Optimus Prime actually does manage to do. Okay, no, I got that wrong. It was actually the Jada Toys version. I didn't really pay much attention to the Hot Wheels one. Whoopsie! For the 5 people in the audience who actually care, by the way, I'm using my copy of the old T4 variant for comparisons. I got this off Marketplace for a 10 or 8 years ago with 0 accessories, I slapped toy hacks on it, and I love it to bits. Regardless, in this chromed finish, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Not everything is chromes. There are a few joints here and there where the pieces have to move, and those are left unpainted. But they're barely noticeable, and structurally it makes sense. It's not exactly pulling the patchwork Golden Lagoon effect, not even close. Also, due to this thing being basically 95% diecast, or whatever modern equivalent, this guy feels weighty and solidly built. It's not a sort of compensatey diecast that adds false weight to account for poor construction. This thing is built like a tank, and when combined with the rubber tires, it makes it really fun to roll around. Also helps that the rubber tires thighs are nice and solid, unlike some previous examples seen on this channel at this scale. From what I can gather, the only two sections here that aren't die-cast are the wheels, which makes sense, they have to be pinned in a specific way, and the fist ports, which would likely cause tolerance issues. The rest is super premium, both in weight and build. The all mode is very much what you see is what you get. It's hard to deny they've put their money where their mouth is. I'm not going to pretend it's perfect though, because there are issues that come from the way this is manufactured. You may notice in some of these shots, the trunk cab tilts ever so slightly forwards. You may also notice that the legs seem ever so slightly misaligned. Go to the bottom and you'll see why. The hip joints on my copy are misaligned, making the gas canisters always push up against the back of the elbow. The damn thing hasn't been punched properly, it's a case of the QC gremlin. I've asked around and it's not something that affects all copies, but it is something that affects a decent chunk of them. Given how quickly these were put into production after the funding period, even shipping before the projected release dates, methinks they didn't do a proper check on them. Of course, there would have been a simple solution to avoid this entirely. The G1 toy actually sits the forearms a bit further forward to allow ease of conversion. The Hot Wheels version doesn't, making it completely flush. It's probably something Manson just happened to miss, and I don't blame him for it. But the combination of this change and the QC f***ery isn't a particularly fun one. It may not be something that affects your figure, but if you're buying loose and secondhand, I'd highly recommend asking the seller first. Beyond that, I do think there's one element that's a teensy bit accurate to a fault. The original toy was designed to hold Diaclone pilots, but without any of them being carried over to the Transformers release, fans took to shoving in the fists in there instead. Hot Wheels recreates this with an opening window section, but due to the fists being ridiculously tiny, they just rattle around in there. The torso doesn't even do anything otherwise. Hell, this is actually how the fists are packaged upon first cracking this thing open. With something this small, it would have been much better to have ports in there to keep the fists from getting lost. I mean, this thing is ridiculously small, basically going for smaller than core class size. You gotta make modifications when you go this small, like removing the parts forming entirely, or at least redoing it in a way that doesn't lead to parts vanishing into the ether. Beyond that though, not much to complain about with this mode. It set out to recreate the 84 Classic, and it did so to an absurdly high level of class. In fairness, it was a pretty easy task to achieve, but credit where credit is due, they did a damn good job. And hey, as someone who was obsessed with small scale, this was always going to be up my alley. It's just a nice figure to drive around on your desk, and if this is the mode you're going to keep it in, there's not enough to dissuade you. Of course, if you're gonna keep it in one mode, you might as well get the non-transforming one, as it's cheaper and comes with a trailer, but I'm not one to dictate other people's purchasing habits. Weird this figure isn't compatible with this trailer though. Beyond the different scales, they both use male ports. Kinda weird they didn't think of it, but given how many trailers I have lying around anyway, I'm probably good. Welcome to the most useless transformation video in history. It's like a vitamin, but for uselessness. If you've ever messed with G1 Prime, you know exactly what you're getting into here. Like, it's not even G1 with certain stylizations, it is just flat out G1. And that's okay, because G1 Prime is a classic conversion. Not all G1 transformations are created equally, but Prime is one of the greats, so nothing to complain about here. Well, aside from the parts forming, but what can you do? First of all, the arms do an Optimus by moving out to the sides with the ball joints and the shoulder joints. They've actually got the elbows on ball joints now, so that's a nice little upgrade. Allows them to retain their articulation at such a small scale. You bring the legs down like so. I think they're supposed to split, but on this copy they don't. The behind the scenes information claims that the designer put them in there, but I'm just not seeing it. And it's ironic considering the G1 version did actually have that. One thing he did add though was new foot mechanisms. They actually pull out and push up. This is actually quite lovely. It's a wonderful way to keep them in place in truck mode. Though weirdly on my copy, when I take out this one, it's got some weird sticky substance on it. Yeah, you can sort of see it in there. It's some weird goo. I think it might be grease or something, or maybe the paint didn't cure properly, or maybe the chrome didn't cure properly. I don't know. It's a bit icky and I don't like it. It's probably bad QC. Anywho, the head just flips over like that. One thing I don't really mention later, but the head actually does turn, unlike the G1 original, which is very nice. And last but not least, the fists plug in. And I'm not a fan of this. I really think these should have been included. There is actually a precedent for this because the smallest transforming version did have them included in the design. And yeah, that was mostly out of necessity because this is a lot bigger than that, probably wouldn't need to. But it's the one thing that should have been left in the past, at least for my own personal tastes. I get why they did it, I just don't personally agree with it. I think that's the one thing they should have left. Well, that and added proper housing for the fists and the torso, because it just doesn't, it's a bit silly. So yeah, in the end, he does an Optimus, and I mean that as a compliment. As I said, the G1 conversion is one of the best G1 conversions they've done. Optimus Prime is classic G1, so to recreate it on a small scale exactly, yeah, it's kind kinda neat. Though if you're just getting this to experience the G1 toy and nothing else, then you might as well be better off with the G1 original. Or Missing Link, or the upcoming Deluxe. Either of those will do you just fine. You gotta get him for everything he does, not just the conversion. Though credit where credit is due, they did the transformation okay, which is kinda neat, considering how bad Hot Wheels has been in the past. Gotta give them kudos. Got to give them kudos. In robot mode, I'm starting to notice something that's a little frustrating. I'm getting the feeling that the Hot Wheels team is a lot more adept at adapting vehicle designs than robot ones. I mean, we've seen history of it with Mattel's weird attempts to capitalize on the various Transformers crazes. But with this figure, while there's a lot good, there's also a lot weird. The overall look is arguably even more gorgeous than the vehicle mode. It feels a lot larger than it actually is, and commands a presence not even the G1 original was capable of. The shorter torso actually makes him feel a lot meaner, less square than the 84 version. Or 86. Look, I don't know what year the T4 variant came out. I just gave it to a G1 expert who told me it wasn't a KO and looked at the number on the back of the head. The one thing that becomes way more visible in this mode is the piercing blue on the legs. You could see it in truck mode, but not to this level. Beyond being super durable, it's just mesmerizing to look at. In many cases, it actually draws your attention away from everything else. This is, without a doubt, the most beautiful blue I've ever seen on a Transformers adjacent product. Fun fact, this kind of metallic deco was actually why I bought Tensegrity Prime a few years back. Yeah, turns out the stock photos just lied. There wasn't a metallic finish at all. Lying f***ers aside, it's really good to see such a lovely deco finally realized in physical form. Combined with the metal construction, you can really see where they put their budgets. You could practically use this as a paperweight with how well it's built. Not that you get any work done with the prospect of messing with him. Yeah, people often forget G1 Optimus Prime was actually a pretty decently articulated figure for the time. The legs didn't do much, but the upper body had a lot more than his wave mates. You'll actually be able to pose this guy in some decent ways, especially since they went the smallest transforming route and swapped out the ratchets for ball joints. It's nothing too crazy, but if you want something more dynamic, he can do a little bit. This is quite a lovely robot mode in the looks department. Mattel does pretty decent sculpt work under the Hot Wheels team, and they've brought over the design quite well. As I said earlier, however, I get the feeling they're better at translating vehicle designs than robot ones, because most of the issues I have with this figure relate to this mode. Of course, you have the legs buckling from earlier, but that doesn't affect functionality that much. According to the Mattel designer, there's supposed to be a hip shifting mechanism added here, but I don't see it. Ironic, considering the G1 toy actually does have one. But whatever, I can live with that. It's not that big of a deal. What I do take more issue with, however, is the paintwork. Not the chrome finish, mind you. Almost everything to do with that is gorgeous. Almost anyway. No, it's everything else. This thing has tamper grafts to mimic the original stickers, and all of them are either misaligned, chipping after minimal transformation, or both. The rest of this figure looks super premium, but these things look and feel like they came from a bootleg. I can't even see the Autobot symbols properly, blending into the rivets. Are these faction sigils or the scribbles in Vladimir Putin's notebook? And the paint on the head sculpts, I don't think I've seen anything this sloppy in a very long time. Not even Zeta was this bad. The faceplate is shifted 2 postcodes to the left, and the eyes are so splotchy that it might as well be based on the IGA version. No, not that IGA. The IGA where they had to paint over the lead due to safety reasons. Seriously, Hasbro was able to do this so much better at 20 bones. Scratch that, they're able to do it better at a tenner. Hell, I don't even think I've seen an Authentics figure with face paint this bad. They put all this effort into the vehicle mode, but now the robot almost feels like an afterthought. Something the packaging also exhibits. I don't usually talk about toy boxes as I tend to throw them out, but this thing is really stupid. The box is designed to display in either truck or robot configurations, but because they're using a plastic shell, Prime can't actually fit in robot mode. It just doesn't work. I don't want to try and force it in, as that would potentially damage the finish, but come on, man. This is a pretty big oversight. At over $100, couldn't you afford some foam instead? Even the gun feels like an afterthought. It's not that he can't hold it properly, that's not my issue. That's G1 accurate, it's actually kind of funny. It's just, this thing feels so light and cheap in comparison to everything else. I just get the feeling they wanted to make a truck that transforms rather than an Optimus Prime specifically. They didn't even take into consideration the chipping on the chrome. Yeah, remember how I said most of the chrome is durable? Well, the silver has started to chip on both the thighs, where it brushes up against the transformation joints, and the fist cavities, where the fists enter their cavities. Like some fist cavity. It's supposed to take years of constant transformation to get these to start flaking. What's your problem? Horrified the smokestacks will be next. Jesus! So, Yeah, this figure has a lot of jank. It feels like they had a few things they wanted to do. Make him diecast, make him metallic, make him accurate to the original. By the time they did all that, all of their focus and dev time was taken up, and they just rushed out the remaining shit like the tamper graphs and final fit and finish. So as a toy, it's sort of hard to give a proper score. There's so much to love about this figure, but there's a few things that you can tell were either missed or flat out not cared about. As a toy in a vacuum, I could still recommend it, but no toy exists in a vacuum. This is where we get to the final hurdle with this figure, how it's obtained in the first place. How much would you pay for this figure in Aussie dollary dues? 60? 70? 100? Try 120 plus postage. Already that's bad, but that's not actually the price you're paying for it. If you have committed the heinous crime of living in Australia, well you get to pay 140 instead. Plus postage costs 35 instead of a tenner. Weirdly, they changed the site later to say it was $5 less though, so I don't know what's up with that. Not like there are any plans to release the bugger again. Regardless, Aussies paid this price. I know they did because most posts complained about how hard it was to get this fella. Guess nobody watched my freight forwarding video because I sure as shit didn't pay that much. Slight problem though, you can't pay that anymore. Mattel Creations isn't that much like Hasbro Pulse. I really just used it as a point of reference. It's similar in the sense that it releases exclusive products direct to consumer, but there's one key difference here. Artificial scarcity. With, say, a HasLab release, you have a window when you can order, and there's no rush. Not so here. Mattel functions a lot closer to Premium Bandai, where there's a specific drop with purposefully low production numbers. Once it's gone, that's it. No chance. At the time, I happened to be sick with the flu, so coincidentally, my sleep schedule was f***ed anyway. I went for the thing because I was up at 3 AM, but by the time I checked out, it was already gone. Couldn't have been more than 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Let's cut the bullshit. This is a scummy way to release products. The reason you never see me criticizing HasLab is because compared to business practices like this, they're practically saints. And this is purposeful. It's not that they couldn't make more. It's not that they couldn't have made them made to order. This is purposeful. This is calculated. I mean, just look at the Bumblebee they released at retail. Deliberately stocking 1 per case of 72, making it the rarest figure they've widely released for the entire year. Oh, but you can buy this stylized, uglier version if you like. But you won't. You want the G1 version. You'll even go through eBay scalpers to get it. Fortunately, I got lucky and found one. This was an impulse buy, but for anyone looking for one, they're basically The current going rate on eBay for Prime, sold listings not active, is $250, and no figure of this size is worth that much. I bought this figure at American retail cost because I adore small scale figures, and having a shrunken down version of the G1 toy in full diecast with a metallic finish sounded amazing to me. At that cost, I'd say he's overpriced, but just barely. But at the Australian price, no. No, he's just too much. And on the aftermarket, I'm sorry, but get f***ed. But hey, if you don't want to deal with the aftermarket, you can always go through official means on the licensed Mattel store on AliExpress for $300. Get f***ed, please. So all this makes reviewing a figure in this situation difficult. Is it worth it? Is it not? Well, that's the thing. If you actually look at this, functionally, this review is pretty pointless. There will be a lot of people who watch and, well, I won't say enjoy, but definitely tolerate this video. And 99% of you won't buy this. 95% of you probably don't even want it. You'll be using this as a reason to see the toy, or just see what I have to say on it. So as a functional review, this isn't fulfilling its purpose. It's not convincing anyone to buy or not to buy it. Anyone who wants this Prime has likely made up their mind already. They're either saving for it, putting it in the position of a grail, or they have it already. This does mean I've basically made a worthless video, but hey, what's new, pussycats? Whoa. So, while all that context needs to be taken into account, ultimately, I can't say I dislike this figure. What it does really well. There are faults, and those are enough to turn a lot of people off, but not me. I think a low 4 ultimately serves this figure well. It just barely scrapes by a 3 to reach that score, but it ultimately does earn it. If you want a G1 Prime in a small scale, there are way better ones on the market. New Age, Dr. Wu, the original smallest transforming version. Hell, for all my complaints, the core class is way better value for money. This Prime, however, is something specifically tuned to my batshit tastes, and I can't say I regret purchasing it in the slightest. He's got a lot of jank, but I'd sooner take this out and mess with it than I would something like Magic Square or even Generation Toy. They could have designed this a lot better. They should have released this in a more ethical manner, but I am glad to have it. He's not for most people, but he is for me. And please, Mattel, never do this again. But as always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on cross-company collaborations below. What's your favorite collab figure Transformers has ever been attached to? What's your least favorites? Have you ever had a figure that was definitely not worth the price, but you still wanted it anyway? And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time!